we'll start with the special session, actually. Started today, I believe. Met with last week on Thursday or Friday. When was it? I think it was Friday. Met with the speaker, our delegation, the county executive, to discuss the special session. It seems as though the leadership has agreed essentially to take up the package that had been close to being adopted previously. But there was a lot of conversation with respect to alternatives, including the possibility of a sales tax, which the governor had floated previously, of increasing the sales tax by 1 cent, which would generate something on the order of $600 to $700 million, which would allow for the state to solve its budget situation as well as create $300 million in transportation funding, which was a big priority for many of us. So there was a fair amount of discussion with respect to that. The speaker made it clear that this is about getting consensus and that is a difficult process, and that if consensus could be achieved with respect to an alternative tax package, that he, for one, was certainly open to it, and we certainly encouraged him to be open to it, because there are a number of us that are concerned that the tax package that is on the table now and likely will be adopted is going to take 32% of its revenue from Montgomery County and put us in a more difficult competitive posture vis-a-vis our competitors, and doesn't completely solve the budget problem on a going forward basis. They may need to increase taxes in the future, doesn't provide any transportation funding, and involves a shift of pensions that the county clearly would prefer not to have shifted to it. So there was certainly a lot of discussion with respect to exploring options, but at this late hour in the process, this observer thinks there's probably this game has really been played already, and but we at least want to make sure that we've done as much as we can to look at the other options. We in the county are almost, we're coming down to the home stretch of our budget process, and we will have some votes later in the week that will be not officially definitive, but really do bring to a close our serious deliberations, and I think we're going to be in good shape. So I'm pleased with the work of my colleagues. We've got some additional work to do between now and Thursday, but I'm confident that we're going to have a budget that's fiscally appropriate and prudent, as well as addressing our highest priorities. With that, why don't I just throw it open to you guys to see what kind of things are on your mind, because mine's been sort of preoccupied lately.
Friday we talked about the ambulance fee bill, and the Public Safety Committee is 2-1. I know on it. But it's going to the council tomorrow. How do you think it's going to get here tomorrow?
It's always difficult to predict how these measures will go. I've shared with my colleagues that there's that great AT&T ad on television that says, "Oh, that was so 2 seconds ago." You know, things do change around here, but so there seems to be building support with respect to it. We'll know soon enough, but it is certainly possible, as was the case last time, that the full council will embrace this fee, this reimbursement, as the county executive says. But again, recognize that that was true when it was considered previously. It was passed on a 5-4 vote before, which is why it ended up going to referendum, was because it was passed by the council, and it could well go to referendum again. I would probably predict that it will, if it is passed by the council, it will once again go to referendum, and the people will make up their mind once again on this issue.
Following up on that, I know on Friday, 6 council members expressed support. What has changed materially between then and now?
Victor, I don't know the context in which 6 people indicated their support on Friday, so you may have been doing your own internal poll with respect to it.
Blog. You should read my blog.
You know, I don't. But so, if you have 6 people that have committed, I'm not suggesting it has. There was a single vote that has taken place, and that was in the Public Safety Committee, and everything else, as far as I'm concerned, isn't official until it's official. So I do appreciate that you may have concluded that there are 6 people in favor of it, and that could be the case. I'm not disputing it. I'm just saying until the vote takes place, my experience here is that, you know, you don't know until it's over.
Well then, I'm gonna ask, well, what's your contingency if it doesn't go the way you want it to go?
Well, look, one, I'm an individual council member, so how I personally perceive it, or my own personal preference with respect to that, is immaterial, except as one member voting. I'm not trying to steer this debate any shape or form. This is an issue that has been debated enough that I feel my colleagues understand the issue. There are legitimate arguments on both sides of this issue, and I will respect all members for their votes with respect to this. I am a district council member, and I represent the heart of the volunteer community that remains unalterably opposed to this measure. So my own view with respect to this has continued to be that I personally oppose this. I opposed it before. I do believe that the referendum matters, and that the fact that this is the only law that has ever been rejected by the voters carries great weight with me. But I appreciate that a number of my colleagues believe that circumstances have changed, that the public didn't truly understand, that Montgomery County residents would not be charged. So I respect all my colleagues' views with respect to this, and which is why I've said to my colleagues that there will be a vote on Tuesday. We need to get this behind us one way or the other. It really doesn't have much of a budget impact this year, so this isn't fundamentally a budget issue this year. It's not to say it won't have impact going forward. Obviously, revenue will be there. The bill has been amended significantly in the eyes of some coming out of the committee. So the measure that is going to be before the full council, some would argue, is different than that which was rejected by the public. I would point specifically to a provision that now calls upon the county to make sure that the volunteers are not harmed financially in terms of the donations that go to volunteers. That's a new provision that was put in the bill in the work session, and that will be before my colleagues tomorrow. So there are competing views with respect to this. I know Chairman Andrews continues to feel quite strongly with respect to this matter. As to how many others share that point of view, we'll find out tomorrow.
Speaking of tomorrow, I noticed that I think Bill 18-12, I believe it is, the disability retirement changes that were arbitrated, is noticeably absent from tomorrow's agenda. Do you know where that bill stands, or is it going to be brought before the full council?
You'll have to check with the committee chairs with respect to those items. It will be up to the committee chairs to schedule further action with respect to it. I'm not aware of any further action that's contemplated at this moment. What else, gang? We had some good news, obviously, on bike share, but that's sort of old news now. And we had good news, I thought, with respect to the CCT. That's a significant development for the governor to choose rapid transit with respect to that system. And the opinion of many of us, the council, the county executive, that means that the development that we hope will take place in that part of our community will take place sooner rather than later. It's a less expensive line. It is really advances by 10 years that which would have otherwise languished, in my view, if we had continued to hope for light rail on that system. It is a system that is so well suited to rapid transit. So pleased that the governor agrees with the county's position on that matter.
What system is it? I know.
It's a rapid. This is
I know.
the
But
Core to
you
Cities Transit
said,
Way.
right, I know, but you said it's so much better suited
Then a light rail system.
than light rail,
Yes. So this
So
is
it's the
rapid
bus.
transit. Yes.
the bus.
We don't call it the bus.
Okay. Sorry.
It's okay.
Second.
Is it a bus, though?
We don't call it a bus.
Okay. All right.
It's you know.
But I'm curious about the innovator position and what it would do and how you envision it.
Well, my hope is that when we go through our process on our budget, that there'll be a number of new initiatives that will be part of our budget and part of our county government apparatus, and that one of them is a chief innovation officer that is patterned after models that have been developed in San Francisco and one other community, Philadelphia. And that is really someone in our county government whose job it is to interact with the public and see what we can do, what assets the county has that would create more economic opportunities for our community. Some work has been done in Chicago, for example, and we talk about apps in which Chicago made its data available, and suddenly now there are a lot of mobile apps available with respect to things going on in Chicago and in San Francisco. Our county has a treasure trove of data, and that data has economic value, and our people actually are one of our greatest resources and have the ability to assist our county in understanding how that data could be used to generate economic activity. And so that is part of it, and it's part simply to have someone in our county government apparatus who really is looking at all the ways in which we can be more innovative. For a long time, we have talked about the Montgomery County Way, and we take great pride in having a Montgomery County Way. And it's also fair to say that sometimes we get a little rigid in how we go about our business in Montgomery County. And so the whole point with respect to a chief innovation officer is to make sure that we break out of the Montgomery County Way when it's appropriate, so that we take advantage of other opportunities and do things differently. So that's part of what my objective is with the Chief Innovation Officer. It's one of the items on our, quote, list of reconciliation items. There's no guarantees that we will fund it, but it's certainly my hope that it'll be among the things that my colleagues consider over the course of the next several days.
I got another question, but it wasn't related to these. I had done a story last week because I had talked to a bunch of retailers that are in the Rockville area in regards to the bag tax, and they were saying that they're being told on by secret shoppers, as what we're calling them, or secret bag tax people, and a lot of people are getting really discouraged about reporting their bags that they're having. Have you received any information from any retailers in the area in regards to the tax recently?
I am not aware of having that conversation. So,
I wasn't sure if you had received any emails after the tax has been implemented.
not on that particular issue.
Okay. Have anything else on that issue?
Oh, I promise you, we do hear about the bag tax, but actually the commentary is, as predicted, I think, started very strong and has begun to phase out. There's still ongoing concerns with, I think there's general acceptance of bag tax at grocery stores.
Mm-hmm.
I think people now are more understanding of that and more accepting. I had somebody come up to me just the other day and said, I went into Nordstrom's, and really, I have to pay for a bag tax at Nordstrom's? So there's pushback on that, and it's something that we'll continue to look at, I'm sure. Victor?
Fuel tax. What option are you personally pushing for, and why?
I am in conversations with my colleagues to see whether or not we can make any sort of good faith effort to reduce the energy tax by a modest amount. It's very difficult for our council to make a significant reduction insofar as the county executive submitted a budget that included continuation of the energy tax. And that's $114 million. So for us to, notwithstanding that it had been the council's previous statement that we would sunset that tax, for us to sunset it now would mean literally we'd have to find $114 million in savings out of the county executive's proposed budget. And I indicated as soon as that budget came over, I thought that was going to be a very heavy lift for us to find those dollars. So I think it is fair to say that when we adopted the sunset provision, we all thought that the economy would be in a significantly better place than it has been. So there is a reason why we are not in a position to sunset this tax. But I do believe that it would be appropriate to look very carefully at making a modest step forward this year without necessarily committing to what we can do in future years, but to look at this year, is there any adjustment that we can make to show good faith in reducing the tax burden that our citizens face right now. I believe that tax burden is obviously going to go up as a result of what the state legislature is contemplating. So to the extent to which we could make a modest reduction now, I think that that's something that we ought to seriously consider. So I've had conversations with my colleagues, and in the next couple of days we'll know whether or not that suggestion is met with their favor or not.
Do you agree with Councilmember Reamer's approach that if you reduce the energy tax, you should be simultaneously increasing property taxes?
No.
Okay.
Although I think it's important to appreciate that the property tax level that is currently before us, and I believe will be adopted by the council, although again, a lot can change between now and then, but certainly that is what I anticipate at this juncture, is almost at an unprecedented level below the charter limit. We are approximately $26 to $32 million below the charter limit, and staff can't tell me the last time we've been that far below the charter limit. So it is something we certainly could raise property taxes and honor our commitment with respect to the charter. But I think the prevailing view is that in a context in which people are struggling still, that we will recognize that by keeping our property taxes well below the charter limit. But it is something that has ramifications going forward. So one of the reasons why I felt that it was something that we ought to explore, so I didn't begrudge Mr. Reamer's observation that this is something we need to look at. We will lose that revenue, if you will, every year in the future, because the base now becomes $26 million less. And so over 10 years, that's a loss of $260 million in revenue that if we'd gone to the charter limit, we otherwise would have had. So you see that we're fiscally constrained and we're looking for alternative ways to raise revenue, the ambulance fee being one of them. And we're making, if you will, a conscious decision not to increase property taxes to the maximum we could under the charter because our people are struggling. All of us have had difficult economic times, and so these are the trade-offs you make. But you need to understand that these are significant trade-offs, and therefore I, for one, was among those that said, let's make sure we understand its significance before simply saying, we won't do this.
And with respect to the ambulance fee, one of the points that's been raised is that the revenue actually technically does go into the general fund. Do you support the idea of creating a trust fund for that revenue?
Well, actually, Rachel, you may be aware that of the committee's action before the Public Safety Committee, there is now very strong non-supplantation language, and so these are dollars that will be allocated fundamentally to our emergency and management services, our rescue services.
Does that, I mean, what does that do in terms of the county executive's argument that this is necessary as a result of some of the costs being sent to the county from the state?
I'll allow you to make your own judgment with respect to that.
Is there anything new on the Silver Spring Transit Center?
Nothing new on the Silver Spring Transit Center that I'm aware of.
Nothing out of the executive session? You had an executive session, and then what happened?
We had an executive session, and they were continuing to explore their options and meet with the legal counsel and get some additional consultant studies as to the integrity of the building. So the fundamental issue that they'll have to grapple with is, does the deviation from the specs that had been put in place represent a structural challenge? And if so, what does one do about it?
Is there a timeline for that information?
Yes, and I don't remember it off the top of my head.
Anything new with Roland Stanley? Has he left? Have they posted the job? He hasn't left yet?
It hasn't left yet. So
No, you haven't heard.
I don't. Victor, do you have something else?
George has an alternative for the ambulance fee. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that, creating sort of a separate fire tax that's uncappable, devoted strictly for fire and fire and emergency services.
Yes, I don't know if Mr. Leventhal necessarily believes it's an alternative to.
That's his language.
That's his language. This is an issue that has been looked at over time for some period of time, but I don't know if it has been explored at enough depth and to have a public conversation with respect to it. So right now we have a, quote, fire tax, but it doesn't really operate as a fire tax. It just becomes part of the general revenue stream, and it's backed into, and but it shows up on your bill as a property tax. So the fundamental question is, should we have a real fire tax? And what is the relationship of that fire tax to the charter limit? So I do think that this is something that is worthy of serious exploration. Anything else, gang? Again, I apologize for running late. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.